Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and our big focus on the show today is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's two-day visit to France. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a two-day visit to France. He arrived in Paris earlier today and received a red carpet welcome at the airport from the French Prime Minister, complete with a guard of honor. As usual, the Prime Minister was nearly mobbed by excited members of the Indian diaspora outside his hotel. Prime Minister Modi will be the guest of honor at the annual Bastille Day parade. That's the French National Day tomorrow, the 14th of July. A 269-member Indian Trial Services contingent will participate in the parade. 3 Rafale fighter jets of the Indian Air Force will also join the flypast along with French jets. Defence ties between the two countries are likely to take centre stage. The visit also marks the 25th anniversary of the India-French strategic partnership. Before his departure, Prime Minister Modi issued a statement saying he would hold wide-ranging discussions with French President Emmanuel Macron, and he hoped to provide a new impetus to the long-standing and time-tested partnership. He also talked about his multiple past meetings with the French President, most recently in Japan during the G7 summit. Some big-ticket defence deals are on the anvil. Most importantly, India's procurement of 26 Rafale marine fighter jets and 3 Scorpene submarines for the Indian Navy worth 90,000 crore. A deal to jointly develop an aircraft engine in India is also expected to be signed. Prime Minister Modi and President Macron will discuss cooperation in the key pillars of the strategic partnership, including civil nuclear technology, counter-terrorism, cyber-security, space, trade and investment, climate change, integration of supply chains and new areas of cooperation in the space sector. A large part of the talks will hinge on co-production and co-development of military hardware, with a focus on India's goal of self-reliance, which has emerged as a major theme of its defence and foreign policy in recent times. Prime Minister Modi has a packed schedule. He has already met with the President of the French Senate. Next, he is scheduled to meet Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne. After that, he will address the Indian diaspora at La Scène Musicale. Subsequently, President Emmanuel Macron will host a private dinner for the Prime Minister. On Friday, Prime Minister Modi will attend the Bastille Day parade as the guest of honor. He will meet with the President of the French National Assembly. This will be followed by a ceremonial reception for the Prime Minister at the Élysée Palace. There will then be delegation-level talks between Prime Minister Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron. The two leaders will also participate in the India-France CEO Forum, and in the evening, Macron will host a state banquet for Prime Minister Modi at the iconic Louvre Museum complex in Paris. The banquet will be attended by 250 dignitaries, and the two leaders will witness the fireworks display over Eiffel Tower from the terrace at the Louvre.
In India, there is trust. We know that we can commit for years, for decades, and we won't change our mind. And that's really important. We've been showing that for decades. I mean, each time each of us country needed a partner, he's been there, and that's very important. So that allows us to bet and to develop jointly technologies which needs years and years and will be used for decades. That's true in the defense sector. That's true also maybe one day for nuclear energy. That will be also true for other technologies. So yes, we have decided to work on the defense sector together. It's important for our strategic autonomy. We work in a spirit of partnership. I mean, French companies have been the pioneer for years of Make in India, and now they totally understood the philosophy of Atmarnir Barbarat, and they really want to share their best technologies and to develop jointly the equipment of the future.
Very big moment for India and France. We are celebrating 25 years of our strategic partnership. This was the first strategic partnership that India signed with any country in 1998, and if you look back, that was not exactly a very good time for India. The world had changed completely after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. India was just in in the early stages of its economic reforms, still hadn't come out of economic difficulties. It didn't have the kind of relationships around the world that it has today. It didn't certainly have many friends in the Western countries. And it is at that point of time that India and France signed the Strategic Partnership Agreement. Since then, our relationship has transformed dramatically over the past 25 years. So this is a moment to celebrate 25 years of our strategic partnership, an extraordinary journey. But it is also a time to look ahead with greater confidence, optimism, and ambition to this partnership in the next 25 years and beyond.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has just touched down on his visit to France. Behind me, in a very special gesture, the Prime Minister of France, Madam Elizabeth Borne, has come personally to the airport to receive the Prime Minister. In a visit that's just about 36 hours, Prime Minister will meet the leaders, presidents of the Senate and the National Assembly. He will also later to address the Indian community. President Macron, who's principal host, organizing a private dinner today evening with formal talks tomorrow. There is, of course, the main event, the Bastille Day celebration. Both Prime Ministers will attend. Later in the evening tomorrow, there's a state banquet, as well as interaction with the CEOs and other personalities. All in all, a very packed program, and we will keep on bringing you updates.
रफाल की बात में अब देख रहे हैं कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर गए हैं और स्कॉर्पियन में सबमरीन्स की भी बात होगी, वो तो अलग बात है। और क्योंकि मैं उसकी बाद में बात करूंगा, पर ये जो रफाल की बात है, रफाल हमको बहुत जरूरी है। इसलिए एक तो हमारी एयरक्राफ्ट की फाइटर स्ट्रेंथ हमको कम से कम 12 स्क्वाड्रन चाहिए, हमारे पास 45 होने चाहिए, 42 होने चाहिए, 30 से भी कम हो गए हैं। तो आप देख लीजिए, मोटी मोटी तौर पे 12 स्क्वाड्रन होने चाहिए। अभी हमारे पास पूरे अब पढ़ नहीं रहे हैं, एलसी आना शुरू हुआ है। और इसीलिए एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर के ऊपर जो हमने बनाए हैं, अब उसमें जो रफाल आएगा, तो रफाल के साथ में उनके लिए और भी चीजें हमें प्रदान करनी पड़ेंगी। हम GE-414 अमेरिका से ले रहे हैं इंजन, उसको हम एलसीए के लिए कर रहे हैं, जो एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर के ऊपर ऑपरेट करेगा, LCA-2, उसके लिए भी हम कर रहे हैं। पर जब हम अपना ये फ्रांस से टेक्नोलॉजी लेंगे, तो टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में हम सोचते हैं और हम आशा करते हैं कि जॉइंट डेवलपमेंट, जॉइंट ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी एंड R&D का इसमें इन्वॉल्वमेंट हो और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में लिखा हो, ताकि हम उसकी R&D कर सकें और फ्यूचर इंजन बना सकें।
This is a great feeling for not only the armed forces but for the entire people of India that we have been represented at the Bastille Day parade for this prestigious event of the French government, and we are happy that we are here as part of a tri-service contingent from the Army, Navy and the Air Force. Also the Army band will also be marching past for the parade.
I'm so proud to be an Indian. It's been 40 years that I've been working for the culture and academics in France, and I'm very proud to be an Indian. And I'm so happy to see that today India is a country of honor, the first time ever in the history of proud. And thank you, Modi ji. Thank you, proud Bharat. Bharat, we're very proud to be Bharat.
I was very excited. बहुत अच्छा लगा मोदी जी को इतने पास से देखने का. Thank you so much.
प्रतिपल जीवन नव कोणों में विकसित होता जाए, धन्य विश्व विद्यालय भारत स्वर्ग धरा पर लाए। मोदी है तो मुमकिन है।
बहुत अच्छा लगा उनको पहले सामने देख करके कि विश्वास ही नहीं हो रहा था कि असली में उनको देख रहे हैं, कि लाइक ऐसा लग रहा है टीवी लगा हुआ है सामने। बहुत अच्छा लगा, बहुत मतलब देश की याद आ रही है मान लीजिए।
Truly blessed and privileged to see him in person, that too in Paris. We are extremely proud of India, Modi and everyone.
बहुत अच्छा लगता है जब अपने देश के प्रधानमंत्री यहाँ आते हैं। और
All right, so excited members of the Indian diaspora who gathered outside the Prime Minister's hotel in Paris and gave him a very warm and enthusiastic welcome. All right, so What can we expect from this high-profile two-day visit of the Prime Minister to France? To understand that, let's now go across to our panel of experts. Joining me on the show tonight is Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti. He is former ambassador and secretary with India's Ministry of External Affairs. A warm welcome to you, sir. Also joining me at this point is Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta, former Indian Navy officer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me. Ambassador Chakravarti, let me start with you. Now, Prime Minister Modi, before his departure for France, issued a statement where he said he hoped to hold wide-ranging discussions with the French president in order to provide an impetus to the long-standing and time-tested partnership between the two nations. Now, as we know, this particular Bastille Day also marks the 25th anniversary of the Indo-French strategic partnership. According to you, sir, how significant is this visit by Prime Minister Modi? He's only the second Indian Prime Minister who is going to be the guest of honor at the Bastille Day celebrations in France. The first one, of course, was Dr. Manmohan Singh. But how significant do you think is this visit by the Prime Minister, and what are your expectations?
Well, the Bastille Day invitation is surely a very important one. The Bastille Day celebration because storming of the Bastille sparked off the French Revolution in 1789. Brought and ushered in a completely new France. So now I think the importance of the invitation is very clear. It's a special occasion, and Prime Minister Modi ji is being given certainly a certain an honor that the French Republic has not given to many people. So I think that is point number one. Point number two is that India and France have now a tried and tested relationship. There are no irritants in the relationship, and we've had a very good relationship with France on the defense side, which I think is going to get boosted by this visit. There'll be discussions bilaterally and internationally. I think the whole range of discussions will basically cover bilateral and international. And I would assume under international, on the international agenda will be the global problems, what's happening in different parts of the world. And I suppose Ukraine will figure. These are the kind of issues and what impact it's going to have. One important aspect, and that's number 3 on my list, is that Prime Minister Modi is visiting France soon after his very successful visit to the USA. Now, that is also a factor because a lot has been said about the visit to the USA and that we are getting very close. But France is also a very close friend. And I think on the defense side, India is very clear that it does not want to create any dependency on any one country. We are still a defense hardware importing nation. And our whole effort now, I think, particularly under Prime Minister Modi ji, is to become Atmanirbhar even in defense. So we've had the jet engine deal with the USA. And now I think we are looking for other, basically technology transfer, both outright buying and technology transfer. The Rafale, for example, has been mentioned. It's a tried and tested aircraft. I think our defense people are quite happy with it. And we need more Rafale, the sea version of it, the aircraft version of it for our 2 aircraft carriers. So I think this it will lead to other. I think there may be some other defense items that, particularly submarines, which is a very important arm of the Indian Navy, and it gives its deterrent value is very high. Submarines, and given that Pakistan and China are putting into sea a lot of submarines, we need the submarines for our own deterrence purposes against a hostile country like Pakistan and not so hostile, but still hostile country like China. So I think in the Indian Ocean and others, the submarines play a very vital role as a deterrent platform. And I think that is a very important. That will be a very important acquisition.
Most certainly. And, it is widely expected that defense ties are going to take center stage during this visit. Like you mentioned, whether it is the expected deal on Rafale Marine fighter jets or Scorpion submarines or even technology transfer. Before we discuss that in greater detail with the Rear Admiral Ambassador, let me ask you this question. As you said, the two leaders, when they meet, are going to talk about bilateral issues and, of course, they're going to discuss global issues. Ukraine will inevitably come up in these talks. Now, it is well known that there is a strategic divergence between India and the West on how the two sides perceive the Ukraine war and Russia's role in it. But at the same time, there seems to be an understanding of India's position. In fact, the French ambassador to India recently said that despite the divergence of views, France's approach is not to preach or to try to put pressure. The two sides are expected to essentially take stock of each other's position. How do you think that is likely to pan out?
When you say the West, it's not a monolithic entity. Different countries behave differently. They have their common positions on certain issues. And I think France, which, like India, values its strategic autonomy a lot. And France does not agree with NATO and the US from time to time. And even on China, I don't think France is in agreement with the USA. Hence, I think France usually sort of follows a pretty independent line. And that is something that it shares with. So I think it's important to note that France and India share what we all call strategic autonomy policies. So I think this is the reason why also France and India have a lot to share in terms of bilateral and international ties. And you are right that France is unlike other countries, and here I really mean the USA, that comes around, preaching on various issues, trying to say that do this, do that, etc., which of course doesn't work because we all know that ultimately it is the strategic interest that trumps various other issues like human rights. So I think, but France has another advantage that it can do it because the EU deals with things like human rights, so it doesn't have to deal with it directly. So that we have a dialogue with the EU on human rights for many years. So I think there we have a free and fair exchange. They raise their issues, we raise their issues. So I think that's the difference between how France behaves and how other Western countries.
Certainly. In fact, even if you look at it historically, France was one of the few countries that, in a sense, stood by India after its nuclear test of 1998 and was opposed to the sanctions that were imposed on India. Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta, let me come to you now. As has been pointed out by almost everyone, some key defense deals are likely to, sort of dominate the agenda over the next 2 days. Uppermost in everyone's mind is, of course, the deal for 26 Rafale Marine fighter jets, 3 additional Scorpion submarines, and transfer of technology and joint manufacture of aircraft engine here in India. And these deals are likely to cost something in the region of 90,000 crore. How significant do you think these defense deals are, with, of course, Atmanirbharta or self-reliance being the leitmotif? How significant do you think it is likely to be for the Indian Navy?
See, for all the 3 items that are being listed for the discussions and likely to be concluded since they have already been cleared by the DAC, all the 3 items are critical. We have built an aircraft carrier. We've got a large sea area of responsibility. We have to, we need an aircraft carrier with its aircraft. We don't have the aircraft. The aircraft is still 10, 12 years away, the one that will be made in India. And therefore, to bridge this gap, we need an aircraft, and the aircraft that has been chosen is the marine version of the Rafale. Now, Indian Navy did a very diligent examination of the two aircraft that were available, and they came to the conclusion that the Rafale M meets the Navy's requirement. The numbers identified is 26, which is 4 trainers and 22 aircraft, most of which will embark on the aircraft carrier. So that is a very essential deal, because as you know that last year the aircraft carrier got commissioned, it has done its trials, it has been inducted into the Indian Navy, but it has no aircraft. So therefore this is very critical, and the Rafale deal will meet this requirement. As far as the submarines are concerned, I'll go back a little in history. We bought 4 HDW submarines in the late 80s. The deal was that we'll buy 2 off the shelf and 2 will be built in India. The idea was that these submarines, once they are built in India, we will get the technology, we'll get the expertise, and then as you have in the car assembly line, you will kind of have an assembly line, if I can use that word, to build further submarines. That never happened because for various reasons, the HDW did not follow up with another lot of submarines. So now, when we were building the Scorpions, the last Scorpion is now likely to be commissioned very shortly, and again the line will dry up. Again, the problem that will come up is that the expertise gained will be lost. So therefore, it was very essential that that line is kept going. The new Scorpions will be upgraded versions. They will have better facilities, they will have better equipment, better capabilities, and they'll be built in India. That is one reason. The other reason is that for long, the prospective plan of the Navy has been to have a large submarine force, somewhere in the tune of around 24 submarines. We've never been able to catch up with that figure. We got, as I said, we got a vast sea area. We got to keep it under surveillance. We got to keep it under, our ships and aircraft and submarines that would have to be deployed. And we need that kind of force. If we don't have, then we are falling behind year by year. And therefore, these 3 submarines will bridge the gap that is there in the existing plans and the future submarine program that is likely to be approved in the next couple of maybe months or a year.
In fact, okay, go ahead, sir. Please complete your point.
As far as the engines are concerned, we've been struggling for many years to develop an engine for our Indian developed aircraft, and that has not happened. We've been lagging behind in that, and therefore we needed the technology, and the French are ready to share technology, develop an engine which will meet the Indian criteria. It is not an engine that you are buying off the shelf. It will be an engine that will be designed, developed to meet the Indian criteria. And therefore it is very critical. The aircraft program, the LCA, the Tejas 2, and also, if I may say, that the deck-based aircraft, twin-engine deck-based aircraft that the Navy requires is far away in development, and the engine deal will help us in all these programs.
Indeed, this is a very, very important relationship. France in recent years has emerged as the second largest arms supplier to India, and these are much needed submarines that the Indian Navy is finally going to get. But of course, this is going to be spread out over many, many years. Ambassador Chakravarti, let me come back to you at this point, sir. Now, even when Prime Minister Modi visited the US recently, even though the focus was primarily on bilateral issues, but fact of the matter is that there was a lot of talk around Russia and China. Do you believe that is equally true in this case, in India-France ties as of today? Because one very important key strategic area of convergence between India and France is the Indo-Pacific and the shared concern over China's hegemony and expansionism. Is that something you would agree with? And at the same time, just like we see America being very keen to sort of wean India away from Russia and reduce India's dependence on Russia's, arms supplies, do you believe that that is something that, France is also keeping a close eye on and hoping to accomplish over time?
But France is an Indo-Pacific power in the sense that France has territories in the Indian Ocean. And it has expressed interest. It has come out with its own Indo-Pacific plan and strategy. So to that extent, yes, it is buying into the Indo-Pacific, initiative that other countries have taken, particularly the Quad countries. So that is something that France will probably increase. But don't forget that all these countries, the European countries, everybody, including India and the USA, are heavily invested in their trade relationship with China. And it cannot be, changed overnight. And there is no need to change it. China is a manufacturing power and it's the second largest economy. So on the economic aspect, China is playing a major role because it has a large trade with all these countries. And India also has a very large trade with China. So I think these issues will certainly keep France in its own way engaged in the Indo-Pacific. But then France will follow its own interests that like every other country. So I believe that, for example, with China, I think President Macron went off to Beijing to confer with, talk to the Chinese and as to what's going to happen and what was China's stand on Ukraine, etc. So these are aspects of the changing international trends in global politics.
Well, most certainly, and it is a fast-changing geopolitical scenario, especially since the Ukraine war broke out. Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta, let me come back to you, sir. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but, Rafale's marine version is going to be used for India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant. And last year's trials by Indian authorities showed that the Dassault jets actually outclassed American Super Hornet F-18s. Also, the French combat jets have really been a mainstay of India's defense ecosystem for over 4 decades now. Even before the 2015 Rafale deal, India had purchased Mirage fighter planes in the 1980s, and we have 2 squadrons of those in the Indian Air Force even today. So historically, how significant do you believe, sir, is the India-France defense relationship? And to what extent do you think this visit will take it to the next level?
See, as far as the Indian Defence Forces are concerned, we've had great relations with France all along. And as the ambassador brought out earlier, France is a resident of our area of responsibility. France has several territories in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, our relationship, especially for the Navy, with France, with the French Navy, have been time-tested. We have got strong relations. We've conducted many exercises, many interoperability issues have been resolved. So we have been doing that for years. And France is a tested partner. There is no doubt about it. And therefore, the purchase of the Rafale M aircraft, which have, as you said, have outsmarted the FA-18, which has been, they've been trying to sell to us for many years. The Rafale M is a good aircraft. The Rafale has been bought by the Air Force. It's being operated by the Air Force. So therefore, the Rafale M is a tested aircraft. There is no doubt. The marine version has been on the French aircraft carrier for many years. I witnessed their flying, I think, in the year 2009, 2010. So it's that old. And so it's a time-tested aircraft, and it's a good deal for the Indian Navy.
For the Indian Navy and much needed fighter jets and submarines. Sir, how important do you think is this component of technology transfer? Because that really seemed to be the big highlight of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States recently. And experts have pointed out that technology transfer seems to have completely redefined the India-US relationship. Now, the India-France dynamics have been different compared to the India-US relationship, which has been more complex in this regard. But, now that there is this talk of transfer of technology happening in India and France agreeing to jointly manufacture aircraft engine here in India, how significant do you think that particular component of this defense relationship is?
Defense deals, the technology transfer aspect is thought of, is inserted in the contract, and then kind of forgotten. And this is the first time or one of the rare times that a lot of thrust has been given on technology transfer, because without technology transfer, we will continue to remain a buyer. We will never be able to develop, though we've been developing a lot of things in recent times, and the Atmanirbharta is really promoting all that. But technology transfer really helps us to imbibe the technology and develop it further for our requirement. And more importantly, to develop that technology to meet our specific requirements. When we buy something, we buy what is available off the shelf. When we buy something, take technology and thereafter develop it to our own requirement, I think that's the best deal one can have. And therefore, technology transfer of the aircraft engine, very critical area, and therefore it's a very important thing that this deal goes beyond just technology transfer. It says joint development, joint manufacture, etc., which is a very good thing. And I must add over here, the rapidity with which these projects have been accepted is commendable. For example, the Rafale Ms aircraft was tried out last year at Goa by the Navy. Thereafter, a report was submitted in the month of March this year. And here we are in the month of July when, already decisions have been taken, which is exemplary speed with which things are being done. And earlier defense projects used to really languish in the files in various corridors. And that's very impressive.
Prime Minister,
so is the case with the submarine.
Absolutely, and we certainly hope that this visit by the Prime Minister will give that much needed impetus to defense ties between the two countries. Thank you so much, Rear Admiral Kapil Gupta and Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, for joining me on the show. Let's now go across to Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former Indian ambassador to France, who is joining us live on the show. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, welcome to the show, sir. A lot is being said about the significance of this visit, the fact that Prime Minister Modi is only the second Indian leader after Dr. Manmohan Singh to have been given the honor of being the the guest of honor at the Bastille Day parade. And then, of course, a lot is being said about how defense ties are going to be taken to the next level. During this two-day visit, a lot of defense deals are on the anvil. How important do you think this visit really is for the India-France relationship?
Thank you very much for having me. I think it's a hugely important relationship. And as you rightly said, the two countries have a lot of deals. What I want to try and paint in front of you and your audience is how the defense relationship has moved from a seller-buyer relationship to an investor-investee relationship to something like co-production, which is on the anvil, especially if Safran decides to co-develop the engines with the Indians. So we are looking at two countries. I just wanted to let you know, Neha, that India has something like 30-odd strategic partnerships. But among all the strategic partnerships, the one which has the maximum strategic convergence is between India and France, because both of them believe in an independent foreign policy. Both of them believe in practicing strategic autonomy, and both of them seek a multipolar world. They are using the defense relationship as a means to achieve those large overriding goals. But I think, as one of your colonels or generals was saying a little bit before, I think it is the rapidity with which the defense relationship has changed from a buyer-seller relationship to something like co-production. I think this is what will take the relationship to the next level.
Well, it certainly looks that way because France has actually promised to support India's Atmanirbhar initiative like no other country, with more considerable transfer of technology and proposals for co-development of next-generation defense equipment. Like you said, it's not just a buyer-seller relationship anymore. The deals that are on the anvil are going to be about jointly, building submarines in India, about jointly building aircraft engines. And this is on the lines of the deals that we've seen between India and the US very recently during Prime Minister's state visit to Washington. Do you believe that the whole idea of transfer of technology is something that is now, in a sense, redefining India's relationships with countries like France and the US?
So happy you touched upon this important aspect. With due respect to the relationship we have with the United States, and I don't want to belittle it in any way, but I think it'll be unfair to France if we do not underline the fact that France's transfer of technology in the defense area goes back to the 1950s and 60s.
That's right.
When the Uragan engine was known as Tufani and when the Alouette engine was known as Chetak. So it's a completely different ball game. I would argue France has more consistently, over time, and more substantially transferred technology in the defense sector. And that is something that India must appreciate. And it's not been an on-again, off-again relationship. I'm not pointing fingers at another country, but France has been consistent and it has really tried to stand by India. It takes into account Indian sensitivities. If we say that this equipment should not go to the hands of Pakistan, that is something France would readily understand and accept. And that is not something a lot of our strategic partners do. So on the whole, transfer of technology has happened close to 100%, I would argue, in the case of the Scorpion submarines. In the case of Zafran, we are really taking it to the next level if we can design and co-develop, co-design, co-development of the engines. If that happens, I think you're right, the defense relationship would have been taken to the next level.
Well, you're quite right, sir, in pointing out that we should not be unfair to France by, in a sense, drawing this equivalence between France and the United States, because fact of the matter is the absence of transfer of technology was a huge thorn in India's side as far as the India-US relationship was concerned up until very recently, while with France, this goes back decades. And let's not also forget that France was one of the few countries that actually stood by India in the aftermath of its nuclear tests in 1998, going as far as to even oppose the sanctions that were imposed on India. So would you say, sir, then, that historically this really has been one of the most important strategic partnerships for India, as Prime Minister Modi said before his departure, a long-standing and time-tested one?
Absolutely. I would say also that that is because there is no outstanding problem between the two countries when it comes to the defense arena. There is no outstanding problem. And I was saying in one of the articles I wrote for a newspaper that Prime Minister Modi was the first non-Western leader to come to Paris and call on President Macron immediately after his election in 2017. I was packing my bags as ambassador was trying to leave France with a little bit of tourism and so on. That was not to be. And I was told, no, the PM is coming. And I was wondering why the PM is coming. And that is just PM's style of investment in leaders. I would say without fear of contradiction that two leaders are considered the closest to Prime Minister Modi. One, Shinzo Abe, who is no more, and second, Emmanuel Macron. So from 2017 onwards, there has been a personal investment of time and energy by the two leaders. And as you know, Neha, in diplomacy, these things matter. But I think you are quite right in saying the way France has taken up our interests in the UN Security Council, for example, listing of Pak terrorists, and that is an issue on which France has taken the lead in the UN Security Council. France has helped us gain membership of the Missile Technology Control Regime. They have helped us get membership of the Wassenaar Group. So if you talk of a strategic partnership which enjoys trust, confidence, and efficient performance, I can think of no other strategic partnership, frankly. Like I said, I'm not belittling other strategic partnerships, but I think you have to somehow reckon with the fact that this has withstood the test of time, and it has been so consistent and so substantial, no matter who the president of France has been and who the prime minister of India has been.
It's interesting. You say this is a time-tested relationship, regardless of who the leaders at the helm of affairs might have been, but you also believe that the personal friendship and chemistry between Prime Minister Modi and President Macron has played a critical role in strengthening this relationship over the years. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. The China factor. Of course, it came up in talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. And I think it would be pretty safe to assume that this is going to be discussed between President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Modi as well, because we do know that a key strategic convergence between the two countries is the Indo-Pacific. France is an important player here, and it is, of course, well established by now that China's growing aggression, hegemony, and expansionism is a concern for India, for France, and for the international community in general. How big a factor do you think this is going to be when the two leaders meet tomorrow?
So that's an excellent question you have raised. I would respond by saying two things. On the Indo-Pacific, relationship between India and France is of paramount importance. Because if you take the Indo-Pacific theater, the United States is more invested in the Pacific, and the Quad is more active in the Pacific. The Indian Ocean is somewhat lightly managed. And I'm a little worried because from 2008 onwards, there has been semi-permanent presence of China in the Indian Ocean. Neha, I should take a minute or two of your valuable time and tell you that I was attending a conference in China when a Chinese scholar told me that it is Indian Ocean, it is not India's ocean. So that is their perspective on the Indian Ocean. France has the largest real estate in the Indian Ocean. They've got Reunion Islands, other islands, they've got Marines posted there, they've got forces posted there, they've got people living there. And please remember this, they are the only country which allows India to use their bases in the Reunion Islands, which is valuable for India. So if you think of the Indian Ocean, the relationship between France and India is the fulcrum. On your question of China, I wish to be clear-headed. I don't think India's current relationship with China mirrors the relationship between France and China. So we should not expect France to do and say the same things that we do. France is tied to China in important ways that India is not. So France, along with European Union, considers China a partner, a rival, and a competitor. So as long as we don't expect any help on the land border, say Galwan, Ladakh, there we are going to be on our own. It is our troops, our boots on the ground. But in the maritime theater, you're absolutely right. France has a profound interest, along with India, in maintaining the Indian Ocean free of any impediment, because 2/3 of their trade goes through the Indian Ocean. So Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific, there is a total convergence of interest between India and France. On the land border, they will probably give us intelligence. They will probably supply us equipment if we pay for it. We should not expect any boots on the ground other than Indian boots. As long as we are clear about this, I don't foresee any problem. But I would certainly say we should not expect a complete synchronization of relationship on China. France has a slightly different perspective, even from the European Union. For example, the European Union is seeking to de-risk the relationship from China. I think India should tell European Union that please do a free trade agreement with us. That is the best de-risking strategy for European Union vis-a-vis China.
And that certainly is something that India is very keen on. Sir, I know you have to leave, but I'd be very grateful if you could indulge me for another couple of minutes so I could ask you on some more critical issues. Now, there are some who believe that France faced a setback when AUKUS came into being in 2021, with Australia scrapping its $90 billion contract with France for submarines. France felt it had been stabbed in the back. And at that time, some very angry French strategists said Paris should fully bank on India. How big a factor do you think AUKUS is in the Indo-French relationship?
So AUKUS was an important factor, as you rightly say. But my assessment is that they have made up, and Australia and France have tried to put their relationship back on an even keel. It'll take some time before the relationship goes back to status quo ante. But I do want to tell you that regardless of AUKUS, France has taken a bet on India. And the bet is that in as much as a multipolar Asia, a multipolar Indo-Pacific is a sine qua non for a multipolar world. This is what the French and the Indians believe. Now, who do you think can ensure a multipolar Asia and a multipolar Indo-Pacific? The answer has to be India. Otherwise, you are looking at hegemony by China, which is something you pointed out in your earliest opening remarks. So I think France has taken a reasoned assessment that in the Indo-Pacific, in Asia, India is the only country worth its name which can act as a counter to the hegemonic ambitions of China. That is something they believe in. But they won't say it because they believe not in confronting China, but they believe in engaging China. So there is a delicate diplomatic balancing act that France is playing vis-a-vis China. But the bottom line is a multipolar Indo-Pacific, a multipolar Asia. It is for this reason that France has taken a bet on India.
France has taken a bet on India. There is no doubt that everybody seems to have a very delicate balancing act to do with China. After calling Xi Jinping a dictator, President Biden has been sending secretary after secretary to Beijing. But that's another story altogether. So do you believe that the Ukraine war is likely to come up in these talks as well? Now, it is well known that there is a divergence of views between India and the West, including France, on the Ukraine war and Russia's role in it. But France has indicated that it respects India's position, that there is an understanding of India's position, even if it's an area of divergence. And interestingly, the French ambassador to India recently said that the French approach is not to preach or to try and put pressure on India. How do you think this is an issue that is likely to be tackled by the two countries? I mean, just yesterday, there was the NATO summit that happened in the Lithuanian capital with NATO sort of assuring Ukraine of full support. And, here we're in a situation where India hasn't even condemned Russia or Putin once for this, for its invasion of Ukraine. So how do you think this issue is likely to be handled between the two sides?
So 3 points, Neha. Point number one, I don't think the French were too thrilled with the position we took on Ukraine. It's no secret that they weren't very excited, they weren't too thrilled. Second, I believe that they have understood our position on Ukraine now. No question. I think that speaks to the trust that has been developed between Prime Minister Modi and President Macron, that in a series of conversations, Prime Minister Modi has made Mr. Macron understand where India is coming from on this issue. Last point, Ukraine will absolutely figure in the discussions, I have no doubt. If for no other reason than the Indian Prime Minister wanting an objective, personal assessment of what is going on in Ukraine. There has been an information war when it comes to Ukraine. There are Western sources which are saying something. If you read the Russian sources, they say something else. Frankly, there is really the fog of war. Nobody knows what the hell is going on there. I think in a private, confidential assessment, there is nobody better than President Macron who can give an assessment, an objective assessment of what is happening in Ukraine. This is important for Prime Minister Modi for two reasons. One, the impending G20 summit in Delhi. Second, we have been arguing for diplomacy and dialogue. The short code for diplomacy dialogue is that India wants the war in Ukraine to end because the war has not got any beneficial consequences for India. Consider food, fuel, fertilizer, we have a problem. So it is good to get a first-hand assessment from President Macron as to who's winning, who's losing, what are the chances of a diplomatic solution, and what are the prospects of a G20 summit that can have a separate paragraph on this question. So I don't think the Ukraine issue has had any negative impact on the bilateral relationship, but I do believe it will figure prominently in what I consider as international regional issues. There is always a segment, international regional issues, when the two leaders meet. This is the area in which Ukraine, I believe, will figure prominently. And I think the Indian Prime Minister will appreciate the assessment, will benefit from the assessment of President Macron. France is a great European power. It's in the heart of Europe. This conflict is in the heart of Europe. So it is good to have an assessment from the French president as to where things are heading in Ukraine.
Fascinating. Final questions, I promise, before I let you go. Apart from the fact that France and other Western countries see Russia and Putin as aggressors, as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, there is also a concerted effort on part of the United States, for example, to wean India off its huge dependence on Russia for arms supplies, which is why for the first time you've seen US agreeing to transfer technology to India. As far as France is concerned, do you believe, again, weaning India away from Russia is an important factor? Because in recent years, France has already emerged as the second largest weapons supplier to India after Russia.
So if I can be perfectly honest with you, I don't care whether it is in America's interest or France's interest, but I think it's in India's interest that we don't put all our eggs in the Russian basket. Yes. I hope I'm being sufficiently clear when I say that. And to me, the two other countries which will be long-term defense collaborators with India, one is France, and I would put France ahead of the United States for the simple reason that it has been a more long-standing partner of India than United States, which has only recently come into the game. Secondly, I do believe the practice of strategic autonomy by India is well understood by United States and France. In fact, I would argue the Prime Minister's visit to France, close on the heels of the hugely successful visit he undertook to the United States, is itself an expression of strategic autonomy. We want to be on good terms with both US and France. So I believe India will not make the same mistake it did in the past, which is put all defense eggs in one basket. I think the United States, France, and other countries will do their bit to make sure that India is not dependent on Russia. And I think India must convey to France that we want to deal with the European Union because we want you to de-risk with China. There's a lot of mutual interest at stake here. And with the United States as well, we can say we want to be in on the semiconductors, on 6G, on technology, so that we make sure that there is a resilient supply chain when it comes to technology and critical earth minerals. We have now a Trade and Technology Council with EU, and France is going to be an important partner for India in that Trade and Technology Council. So I see a whole lot of issues which I think will make for greater convergence. And I don't think United States and France will have any problem with having a defense relationship which is substantive and mutually beneficial.
Absolutely, and you're quite right in pointing out that it is in India's own interest not to put all its eggs in one basket. And let's not forget that given that Russia is now increasingly seen as a close ally of China, that is perhaps another very big reason why India needs to reduce its dependence on Moscow. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir, talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and perspective on this very important visit of Prime Minister Modi to France.
Thank you very much for having me, Neha. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. You too. Well, of course, this is an important visit by Prime Minister Modi to France. Packed schedule over the next 2 days, a lot of important defense deals that are expected to be signed. This is a story we'll track very closely here on Global Lens. But for now, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching.